The Celtic god Belenos was worshipped from Italy all the way to the British Isles, and he was often syncretised with Apollo, as evidenced by inscriptions which are dedicated to Apollo Belenos. But who was this deity really? Some say a sun god, others a healer, and there are even theories that connect his name to strength, power, and even the psychoactive plant Henbane. In this video, we'll explore the myths, the inscriptions, as well as the scholarship, and if you stick around to the end, I'll even introduce you to a real person from history who was also referred to as Belenos. The worship of Belenos is attested in numerous epigraphic and literary sources across the Roman Empire, particularly in regions with Celtic influence. In the epigraphic record, the Romano-Celtic name Belenus or Belenus appears in 51 inscriptions, the majority of which come from Aquileia, where the god was especially venerated. As noted by Helmut Berken, Aquileia was the site of Belenos' main sanctuary, and to this day, part of the town, he reports, is still known as Beligna, and the high concentration of inscriptions from the city suggests it was a key centre of his cult. In addition to the inscriptions, there are several important literary references to Belenos. During the siege of Aquileia by Maximinus Thrax in 238 AD, Belenos was said to have appeared floating in the air defending the city, a scene reminiscent of Apollo's defence of Delphi against Brenos of the Gauls in 278 BC. This miraculous defence underscores Belenos' role as a protector deity, as well as his associations with healing and divination, which are both qualities commonly linked with Apollo. Belenos' role as an oracle and health-giving deity is further emphasised in works such as Tertullian's Apologeticum, where he is described as a typical Norican god. In addition to this, Ausonius tells us that Belenos was also worshipped in Bio, a region located in modern-day Normandy. We find further references for the veneration of Belenos in the form of a votive inscription from the poet Lucius Erax Bardus from Caesarian times at Bardonecchia in Cisalpine Gaul. The Carni, an ancient Celtic tribe of the Alps in northeastern Italy, were known for their religious practices, including oracles and healing. It is within this cultural context that Belenos is associated with prophetic traditions, further cementing his role as a deity who provided guidance and protection to those in need. Berken suggests that Belenos was one of the Celtic deities whose cult was widespread, reflecting the broad reach and popularity of his worship in the Roman world. These epigraphic and literary sources combine to present a picture of Belenos not only as a major deity in Aquileia, but also as a widely venerated figure throughout Celtic and Gallo-Roman regions, where his syncretism with Apollo further underscored his important role in both healing and divination. Let's now take a look at some of the actual inscriptions. First up, we have one from Bardonecchia, a town in what is now considered northern Italy near the French border in the Western Alps. Lucius Erax Bardus, following the advice of the high priests, gave this temple with its adornments to the god Apollo Belenus from his own means. Next, we have an example from Narbo, which is known today as Narbonne, a town located in southern France. Turpio willingly fulfilled a vow, as was proper, to Belenus. Next, we turn to Virunum, a Roman city located in the province of Noricum, which corresponds broadly to parts of modern-day southern Austria. Gaius Marius Severus gave a gift sacred to venerable Belenus. And from Aquileia, which was located in what is now northeastern Italy, we find a grand dedication under the emperors Diocletian and Maximian. The emperors, willingly and with devotion, dedicated this to Apollo Belenus. Finally, over in Roman Britain, in what is now Kirby Lonsdale in Cumbria, we find a fascinating inscription. To the divinities of our emperor, and the genius of the guild of Apollo Belenus, the dedicator willingly and deservedly fulfilled his vow. Now that we've looked at the inscriptions left behind by worshippers of Belenos, let's now turn to what the ancient authors wrote about him. From Roman historians to Christian apologists, the name Belenos appears in texts that span centuries, and they reveal how deeply this Celtic god had woven himself into the religious imagination of the Roman world. Ausonius commemoratio. If the report does not lie, you were sprung from the stock of the Druids of Bio, and traced your hallowed line from the temple of Belenus. Hence the names borne by your family, you are called Patera, so the mystic votaries call the servants of Apollo. Your father and your brother were named after Phoebus, and your own son after Delphi. In this poetic tribute, the Roman author Ausonius ties the cult of Belenos directly to a druidic lineage in Bio, modern-day Normandy. He also reinforces the identification of Belenos with Apollo, referring to the family's religious titles and names as signs of sacred devotion. Ausonius, therefore, places Belenos not just in myth, but in noble bloodlines, religious hierarchy, and the intellectual elite of Gaul. Herodian, Historiae Romanae. Writing about the siege of Aquileia by Emperor Maximinus Thrax in 238 AD, Herodian recounts, some oracles were published announcing that the god of the fatherland promised victory. They call this god Belenos, honour him with an almost fanatic worship, and claim that this divinity is none other than Apollo. Some of Maximinus's soldiers claimed that the image of this god appeared to them in the air, fighting in the defence of the city. This account presents Belenos not just as a local god, but as a divine protector whose intervention recalls the prophetic and martial qualities long associated with Apollo. The image is also reminiscent of how Apollo was said to defend Delphi from the invading Gauls under Brennus, appearing in a moment of crisis to turn the tide of battle and reaffirm his sacred presence. Julius Capitolinus, Historia Augusta. Even the god Belenus had affirmed through the intermediary of the haruspices that Maximin must be defeated. This is why Maximin's soldiers then claimed, it is said, that Apollo had fought against them, and that the victory was in fact due not to Maximus and the Senate, but to the gods. Here Belenos is portrayed as giving oracles through the practice of haruspicy, a form of divination. The source even acknowledges soldiers' claims that Apollo himself had fought against them, possibly as a way to save face after defeat by a civilian force. Tertullianus Apologeticum. Each province, each city, also has its own god. Thus Syria has Astagatis, Noricum its Belenos. In this early Christian apologetic work, Tertullian casually mentions Belenos as the local god of Noricum, showing just how recognised this deity was across regions. Two main etymologies have been proposed for the name Belenos, both drawing on Indo-European roots but offering distinct interpretations of the god's original character. The first and most familiar derives Belenos from the Proto-Indo-European root bel, often glossed as meaning bright or shining. This reading has been reinforced by the Roman interpretatio of Belenos as a counterpart of Apollo, a solar deity. Derivative terms which utilise this root include the Lithuanian word baltas, which means white, the Greek phalos, which means white or shining, Armenian bal, which means pallor, and Gothic bala, which means grey. However, some scholars have questioned whether this root truly implies brilliance or merely donates pallor or lightness in colour, suggesting the connection may be more interpretive than linguistic. An alternative interpretation links the name Belenos to the root belo, meaning strong or powerful. This reading is supported by related forms such as the Gaulish belisama, which means the most powerful, the Sanskrit belam, which means strength, and the Greek beltistos, which means the best or most excellent. So rather than the shining one, Belenos may originally have been understood as a master of power, a figure of strength, protection, or possibly even martial authority. Finally, J.P. Shriver has advanced a more specific argument that the name Belenos may originally derive from the psychoactive plant henbane, suggesting a cultic or ritual relationship between the two. Henbane is a potent and dangerous plant that has been known since antiquity for its medicinal, narcotic, and hallucinogenic properties. It was used to soothe pain, to induce visionary or ecstatic states, as well as sometimes being utilised as a poison. The plant's effects include vivid hallucinations, feelings of transformation into animals, sensations of flight, and manic excitement, all of which may have contributed to its religious and oracular use. This psychoactive dimension may help explain Belenos' association with Apollo, not only as a healer, but as a god of prophecy. The sources we looked at earlier do describe Belenos as a giver of oracles, and if his cult was originally linked to henbane, it's plausible that his prophetic or ecstatic function was mediated through ritual use of this potent herb, whether by ingestion, fumigation, or other ceremonial means. Linguistic clues suggest that the name Belenos may share a root with words for henbane across several European languages. Shriver highlights how forms like the Spanish Beleño, Gaulish Belenutia, and Gallo-Roman Belisa all point to a common bell root. In Welsh, we find that the words bella or belle carry the same meaning as well as the Breton word belan. Even the Latin personal name, Belisamarus, which possibly means great in henbane, hints at an older cultural connection between this powerful plant and names derived from the bell root. While not conclusive, these patterns do suggest an intriguing overlap between words for henbane and the divine name Belenos. Given the high number of inscriptions dedicated to Belenos, it's clear he was an important regional deity. If his name is indeed derived from henbane, then henbane itself must have held serious cultural significance, not just medically, but spiritually. In classical texts, Pliny the Elder calls henbane herba Apollinaris, or Apollo's herb, reinforcing the sacred status of the plant and hinting at shared functions between Apollo and Belenos. A point which adds further intrigue is the discovery of a shallow libation bowl dedicated to Belenos, which resembles a phiale, the ritual vessel used in the Greco-Roman mysteries. Scholars suggest it may have held a psychoactive preparation, possibly henbane, to induce altered states during healing rites or trance-based prophecy. The Delphic oracle may offer yet another connection, as some ancient sources suggest that henbane was used by the Pythia, Apollo's prophetic priestess, at Delphi. In the Greek manuscripts of Dioscorides, He tells us that the plant was also known as Puthonian, after the sacred region of Delphi, as well as the name prophetes, which was a word meaning prophet. Democritus allegedly named Henbane Thriambon, linking it to the ecstatic Dionysian hymns, while folk traditions called it Imanes, a word meaning frantic or raving, which was often used to describe the frenzied Maenads. This same link between ecstatic frenzy and prophetic insight is underscored by Plato, who notes that the words for madness, manike, and prophecy, mantike, were once one and the same. If you're interested in further exploration into the potential connections between Belenos, Beltane, Apollo, and the mysterious powers of Henbane, then you can check out this video here, which I filmed during this year's Beltane Fire Festival in Edinburgh. In my view, the rites of Beltane bear an uncanny resemblance to ancient fire rituals which were once performed in honour of Apollo somewhere in the Mediterranean world. Finally, I just want to introduce you to a historical figure who was intriguingly sometimes known by the very name Belenus. This man is Apollonius of Tyana, a real historical philosopher and spiritual teacher who lived during the 1st century CE. While lesser known today, in antiquity and the medieval world, he was considered a figure of profound spiritual authority. So much so that in later centuries many regarded him as a pagan parallel to Jesus. Like Jesus, Apollonius was said to be born miraculously, his mother, according to legend, having conceived him through divine means. He was a renowned healer, miracle worker, and ascetic who studied in Egypt, Babylon, and even India, where he sought wisdom from sages and holy men. As a Neo-Pythagorean, he advocated for purity, vegetarianism, and a disciplined spiritual life. He taught in temples, challenged authority, and much like Jesus, he was eventually arrested by Roman authorities, put on trial, and according to some versions of his story, was executed and then ascended to heaven. In short, he mirrored the Christ story in startling detail. Etymologically, Apollonius means of Apollo or belonging to Apollo, linking him directly to the god of light, healing, and prophecy. But in Arabic and medieval Latin manuscripts, he also appears as Belenus, Belenas, Apollonius, and even Belenus. In a history of magic and experimental science, Lynn Thorndike shows that Apollonius was revered as Sahib al-Talismat, or the Master of Talismans. The works that are attributed to him include astrological treatises, theurgic manuals, compendiums on alchemy, poisons, and antidotes, as well as a work called The Golden Flowers of Apollonius, a title that may nod not only to divine radiance, but to the golden blossoms of Henbane. So the idea that Apollonius, also called Belenus in medieval texts, was connected to golden flowers and divine prophecy adds another layer of potential symbolic overlap. Lucia Raghetti's article, Apollonius of Tyana's Great Book of Talismans, describes a Syriac talisman adapted from a lost Greek original. This particular talisman is a form of mirror fused from copper, iron, lead, silver, gold, and crushed glass, with its frame set with 7 raised gems inscribed on gold leaf. According to the text, gazing into this mirror reveals everything on earth and in the sky: the zodiac, angels, jinn, demons, and the 4 corners of the world. The 7-gemmed frame, as well as the style of writing used in the text, echoes rituals found in the Greek magical papyri. In PGM 13, scrying mirrors are used for prophecies by Helios, with instructions to recite the heptagram or the 7 vowels or planetary sounds. And in PGM 12, a hymn to the deathless god, we find a description of a 7-lettered name that harmonises the 7 planetary voices, which is spelled out on the back of the stone as Iao Sabaoth Abrasax. And here's the final revelation. In Greek isopsephy, the names Mithras, Abrasax and Belenos each total 365, the number of days in the solar year. These magical 7-lettered names seem to encode heptadic symbolism by echoing the 7 classical planets, the 7 vowel sounds, as well as the 7 days of the week. This reinforces Belenos' solar and calendrical aspects, suggesting he may have been envisioned not just as a sun god, but as a 7-rayed deity of cosmic order. So that's going to conclude this video on Belenos today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Finally, thanks to everyone who supports me and this channel, it's much appreciated. Catch you on the next one. Old Boy, out.